afternoon.
Yeah, you're right, she is.
Let's call the workshop to order, please. Today is March 2nd. We're here for a special workshop on code enforcement rules and regulations. And remember, on the workshop, we make no decisions, but we try to give direction on where we're going so we can get things written up in a way that there's no votes, there's no just open discussion about what direction do we want our administrator or attorney to lead us in. And with that, I think all of you have got the multiple pages of what we've done, tried to do, or maybe almost did, I don't know, but Nick, I'm gonna let you help give us a little background before we open the floor. How's that?
Sure. I'll go in the order that they're listed on this agenda. The city clerk and I, we just pulled together everything we could find. These aren't necessarily all gonna be items that are critical to you, but this is a pretty complete list of your code enforcement related rules in the city. So the first one is section 150.04, travel trailers, motorhomes, campers, RVs. That's from your city code. That's the city code that you can pull up online off of the city's website that American Legal Reports maintains. Those are your rules primarily about RVs that have been in place for quite a while. They don't have anything to do with Hurricane Michael. They were there before Hurricane Michael. They're still there. They haven't been changed. You will see the rules about temporary usage of an RV. You'll also see rules about using an RV during construction. The next item on this list is section 10.99 penalty. I believe that is just the general penalty from your city code, but that's not going to have much relevance because you have an adopted schedule of specific penalties for code enforcement violations, which is the last page of this document. We did that by resolution about a year or so ago, year and a half ago. And it provides a matrix of what the right amount of penalty is for different kinds of violations, and it's usually a per day amount. Let's see. 1C is ordinance 559. Gotta look to see what that one is. I think that might be a duplicate of what's in the city code. Yeah, that's
Very close.
That's when, it looks to me like that was the ordinance you adopted, which then led to the city code being written up the way it is. Mayor, did you see any differences?
Not that are specific to what's already in the city code. No.
Yeah, so I believe that you can treat that as a duplicate. The next item on here is ordinance 709A. That is an ordinance that the council adopted following Hurricane Michael. It dealt with RVs, it dealt with temporary commercial buildings, dealt with a variety of topics. The take-home message on that ordinance, though, is it was a temporary ordinance and it's expired. It's been expired for a while. I think it's been influencing some of what the city's been doing, but it is expired. And you have a similar rule about having an RV while you're doing construction in your city code already. So that aspect of the ordinance, it's alive and well in your city code. Okay, what's next?
Can you repeat that? 709 is expired, but what part is alive and well?
So if you look to your city code, which in your packet would be the page 2. There is a rule in here that says RVs may be occupied as temporary housing at the permitted construction of a residence. The permitted construction of residence. The use of such RVs as temporary housing shall cease upon completion of such construction or upon the passage of 1.5 years, whichever shall occur sooner. RVs used as such will be connected to a proper and permitted sewage disposal system at the construction site. So that's the rule that's in your city code that overlaps somewhat with what was in that ordinance 709 that expired. In ordinance 709, I talked about a 6-month time period. At the time when we wrote that up, the general understanding among the former city administrator and council members was there was a 6-month time period allowed during construction. We couldn't put our finger on where that was from, but we had enough people saying it that we went with that 6-month period. It turns out the city code had a, not identical rule, but similar rule that was 18 months. So that's the overlap, that's the part that I meant.
Okay.
Even though the 709 ordinance is expired, you still have that living in an RV while you're doing construction is still an option.
And that's part of actually 559?
It's both. It's section 150.04 in your city code, but I think that was adopted by ordinance 559.
Okay.
The next item here is the big complicated one. That's your code enforcement process from the land development code. It starts with 7.10.00. It talks about the parameters for special masters, who can serve, what they do. It talks about the notices and the violations, how they're procedurally done, how long somebody gets to fix their violation, how the hearings would occur if they're requested. So there's a lot going on in that section. It's several pages long. The next item is the fine schedule that you've adopted. That's really combined F and G. It's resolution 2019-16, but exhibit A is part of that resolution. So that's toward the back of the packet. It's the big chart. Like the first item on it is construction defense without a permit or unauthorized height. First offense, $150. Let's see if there's I know RVs are a hot topic. RV violation, $100. And the way that works in your code enforcement process, if it's a violation that's uncorrected, it continues to be a violation for the following days. So you're not talking only $100 for a problem. $100 could rapidly turn into $1,000 or more.
There is a ceiling.
There is a ceiling, yes. The land development code sections about code enforcement and special masters, they cap it out after the initial violation, plus you can get 30 additional days for continuing violations. So the ceiling is 31 times this amount, which really is quite a bit. And the reason for that is there have been cases where it's been unconstitutional when a fine has just accrued so high that it's turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars. We didn't want to do that. So if you have a violation that isn't corrected, it'll cap out at the maximum of that 31 times the fine amount. And then the options at that point are to go as a city and clear the violation on your own and charge the property, or you can do a whole new code enforcement process where you might start the fine process again. But I mean, I think the goal really is to get things cleaned up, not to get the most fines possible. So ordinarily, the next step beyond just several days worth of fines would be the city probably going and clearing the violations. So. The last item in this packet is it's just a hand-drawn chart that sketched out when this process was adopted. It shows two different scenarios. The first one is if there's an appeal requested. A lot of the detail in that prior document from the Land Development Code is about the appeal. But what we're running into more frequently is there are situations where there's a violation, there's no appeal requested, there's not much in terms of a response or argument of why there's no violation. So that's the second option on this flow chart, I guess. And it just shows that normally the way that the notices of violation are going to be set up, there'll be 20 days to request a hearing, and they all actually have a a 10-day grace period. If you get a notice of violation and you correct the problem within 10 days, any fines are waived. But you have 20 days to request a hearing. So in typical scenario with no appeal requested, you've got a penalty from day one because you committed the violation. If you never contested or proved you didn't commit it. And then the continuing violation penalties would start after the time has elapsed for requesting a hearing. So if somebody doesn't request a hearing, they don't really do much, they don't really respond to the city, their penalty on day one applies, and then 20 days later, they start getting a new penalty once a day for up to 30 days. So we actually have, I don't know the number, but we have a lot of pending code enforcement violations where there was a notice of violation issued, and as far as I know, it was done properly, the notices were sent correctly, and there hasn't really been much response, at least not a request for a hearing. So there actually are several cases where I think people have theoretically hit this 31-day times their fine situation. I don't think the city has taken the next step to lien the property but I don't think the city's taken that step yet. Because what we do on these no appeal cases, even though there's not an actual hearing with the special master, we still have the special master sign the order, flip through the paperwork, make sure it looks reasonable, nothing important's missing. And I don't know that we did much of that prior to removing our special master. So that's the overview. There's a lot of details in there, but I'm not sure which parts everyone's more focused on, wants to hear more about, talk more about.
All right, well, I think that's what we're going to discuss. It's an open discussion about what we want to do, so we'll just sort of leave it at that, and then if we need, if you see us trying to, we just get too far out there, bring us back in. Don't let us, we're try to stay focused on what we want to, there you were
I'm the one that
equally,
caused
well,
this.
but I mean, there was obviously consent to want to do this.
Yeah.
But what is the, what do you see as the focus of this workshop to try to define?
Well, I think what I would like to do is to make it clear to Kathy, our code enforcement lady, to have a really good idea so that she has something that she can look at and go by. I mean, just reading through all of this took us 10 minutes to kind of briefly go over this. There's no wonder that this stuff has kind of been tough because there's a lot in there. We got some that was written that doesn't apply now, some that was expired. So I just think we need to clarify, and I think we need to make sure that Kathy has a format that she can follow. Because, I mean, or do you know all this, Kathy? I mean, is this?
All?
Yeah, I mean, is this clear to you?
No.
No, it's not clear to me, so that's all I wanna do, is just to try and clarify and make it as easy as possible whenever we see a violation to know what that violation is. The other thing too is, you know, we were just getting to the special masters stuff. I mean, that's the reason we wanted the special master, so we could have some form of enforcement. And of course now, have we made any progress with any attorney?
A little. When I stepped out before the meeting, I was actually on the phone with one. I've reached out to a few. I've got one who's responded back, tentatively interested, and we're still trying to speak to a few others. So a little progress, but we're not ready yet to recommend somebody or tell you price terms or anything.
And again, to clarify, we talked about in the last meeting, any cost that the city incurs from that person will be added to the fine of the person that's in violation, correct?
I'd like to set it up that way. We may have to cap it just to keep it from getting unreasonable, but I'll look into that further to figure out exactly how far we can go.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with capping it unless you got some incredibly extenuating circumstance, you know? 'cause-
It's typical, it's normal to have, some costs of the hearing included. I wanna get comfortable with what becomes a level where it's too much and maybe it's vulnerable to challenge.
Okay, so I guess to finish what you asked me, now I just think that one of the things we should probably do is, I mean, let's go through here and figure out what is actually relevant and what isn't anymore. Because
Right.
some stuff's expired and some stuff's still in effect. It looks like we just need to do a cleanup of this whole little thing here. Instead of having all these other, you know, we got all the way through H. I'd like to see A, B, and Z, you know, when we kind
I
of
agree
boil it
with
down,
that.
yeah.
I think, and one thing, just for simplification, it was mentioned that the city code, I don't know when the city code was written, that's 150.04. But that's a good starting point, it's been around, and unless you don't want, some of the things behind that are things that got from the storm, got altered, got changed, got, you know, trying to love everybody and, but if the city code, if the 150.04, to me, is a good starting point simply because it's been part of the city land development code. I don't know that it was part of it in 1991, but I bet it was. Nick, would you guess? I mean, I don't remember us adding any of that.
I remember when.
We may have, I don't know.
When Mel Smilgowski was still the city administrator, that's when we did this original compilation of the current way the code is, but I don't think that was the first time it was compiled. I think that was just a big refresh and update. I mean, we can tell right away how old that RV rule is. It was adopted in Ordinance 559. So, yeah, nothing in that city code about code enforcement or RVs is especially new.
No, but it defines the rules.
Oh, yes.
That's all I'm trying to do. Then the code part is something we can talk about, okay, what do we wanna give them? How many times Kathy gotta go write them a letter? How many times you gotta knock on the
Yeah.
door? How many, you know, all that, but I think the rules are important.
Can you went over it and explained, can you do a slow roll through it so that I can make some, or we can make some notes?
Sure.
Just say, you know, explanation of A, how much of that's good, where is it included, so that, because, you know, I was kind of hoping we were gonna be able to come in here and fix this thing pretty quick. I don't know that this is not gonna take, might take Darryl a couple of times to figure it out.
We're gonna try to fix it today.
I'd love to fix it, but it's a lot, there's a lot to it.
It's a lot of it, and I'm like you said, and he said, if you go back to this 150.04, and that's this one, in my opinion, that is. But when I turn them pages and get over to them other ones, it does get tough.
Yeah.
But this one right here, like how.
Yeah,
And
well, it's
start
just
right
the
there.
basics.
That's the basics, that right there, if we could go through it, and say yes, no, yes,
Yeah,
well, let's
right.
add this, let's do this, in my opinion, that, and I sure ain't taking away from that, because I'm glad we doing this. But I think this right here, there's 2 or 3 things on this that I'd like to add or take away some.
Okay,
So big picture. The
okay,
city has really 4 kinds of ways that it organizes its rules. You've got a standalone ordinance that never gets codified somewhere else, it's just an ordinance. They tend to go to city code or land development code, but they don't always. You've got the city code, and that's what 150.04 is. That's generally focused on conduct, it's focused on things like utilities. You've also got a land development code, that's usually focused on how property is used. You happen to have your detailed code enforcement process in your land development code. That's just how folks before us prefer to do it, that's where it lives. It's a little confusing because you got land development code hearings about an issue that popped up in your city code. It's 2 different documents, but the process is really in the land development code. And then finally, you've got resolutions on some issues. Some issues don't require an ordinance, and your resolutions don't tend to go into the land development code or the city code. That's why you've got more than one place to look. As far as this list, what you could ignore today, well, you can ignore ordinance 559 because it's a duplicate of that first item on the list.
Okay, so this is a duplicate.
So that's the ordinance that got adopted to lead to the language to be in city code. We probably shouldn't have included both, but it just was a more comprehensive list. So that one, you don't really need to worry about today.
Okay,
The other one that you may or may not want to worry about is ordinance 709A. Again, that's the one that's expired. So you could forget about it because it's expired, but nobody's really wanted to completely forget about that in terms of what I've seen in conversations. And I think that's still influencing people's thoughts.
Okay.
That one's expired.
and how is it influencing people's thoughts? Because what's?
Maybe it's just confusion. People might not realize it's expired. I
Okay.
just hear it talked about a lot still.
Yeah, okay, so it is expired, so essentially it's non-usable,
Correct.
okay? So then we're back to 150 again. All right, keep going.
709 is not expired for food trucks.
Let's look.
What happened to the original
Excuse me,
709?
get public comment there.
Anytime, anybody,
This portion, so.
yeah, we don't have to, sort of workshop, sort of track sheet, if anybody. I'm trying to find a way to give us value to our meeting in terms of, and help me now, Nick, but if there's disagreements with 15004, is that a good place to start, to say, okay, we'll just go read through them and say, because it pretty well outlines what.
I think that's a good place to start. I think trying to dive into the details of your code enforcement
Yeah, I
process
don't have a lot
is
of value in
challenging,
it.
and that process should work fine. It just hasn't.
It's worked
Had a lot.
before, is all I'm saying, and the code, the special master process has worked.
And that was a process that the city's had for several years, and then it was updated in 2019, just to ensure that there weren't any internal inconsistencies or problems with enforcement. But that process, it's complicated because it kind of needs to be. It's many important. But I would be hesitant to make large changes to that right now, but the substantive rules, what's a violation, what's not a violation,
Yeah,
that's definitely fair game, and people have different opinions and different understandings of that.
well, let's just start. Let's start. Hardest part of getting through is start. So let's just run through them and let's just see what kind of comments we get. On A, I'll just sort of lead it and then just say, it's pretty easy to say that's what they define occupying and what a recreational vehicle is. Is there anything about that that we don't like, want to talk about? Sleeping overnight in or parking a recreational vehicle defined herein is any location. It's just defining what occupy means. Kathy, are you familiar with 150.04?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you, are there any things in here from your day-to-day work that cause you a problem?
Well, yes.
All right, well then maybe we ought to hear from you.
Well, some of the phone calls, I get 3, 4, 5 phone calls a day about RVs. I just got off the phone a few minutes ago. They'll ask, they say, can I bring my RV down for 3 or 4 days and work on my lot? Or can I bring my RV in, I'm buying a lot on this street, can I bring my RV in, I won't live in it till I get a permit, and then I'll be down in it. And it's just crazy things like that, personally, I think there shouldn't even be an RV on the lot until there is an active building permit. And
Doesn't it say that somewhere in here?
Keep in mind, this also says you can bring an RV and have it and use it for 14 days. Yeah, that's the opening
Okay.
volley.
That's probably, it should be, as far as using it, it should be at your residence,
Yes.
is what I'm looking at.
It
should be- It should be somebody come down and said, okay, I'm leaving my RV on this lot, I'm just staying 2 days today. 2 weeks from now, I'm gonna stay 2 more days, like that. It should be at your residence, it should be at storage, you store it or use it 14 days out of the year. And I still feel like they should have a permit for whatever days they gonna be using. So Kathy could keep up with it instead of having to ride around, say this slide out's out, this sewage is set up. It should be set up in a sense that if somebody's gonna, if my RV, if my children's coming down, and I wanna stay in the week, I got to get a permit for that week. That way she would have a record of how much is used. But it cannot, I cannot see a RV just put on a lot. First of all.
You're talking about
they
vacant
should
lot
have-
now, aren't you? You're talking about a vacant lot.
Vacant lot.
Vacant lot, okay.
First of all, they don't have the hookups, shouldn't have hookups.
What if it's just vacant now because the house is gone, and what if it had a house on it?
If they don't have some type of building permit, it's over 2 years. It's beyond somebody just coming and putting an RV and staying. We're just beyond that. Yeah, I hate to be mean about it, but I think we're beyond that time.
Well, look at H. I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying that H gives you 30 days and another 30 days, and if there's hardships.
But it has to be approved.
Well, okay, but that's not just coming down and putting it on there. You do a hardship, you're gonna have to come prove it to us.
Yeah,
They can't just say, well, this is hardship, I'm gonna come and stay.
No, see, it has to be approved, it has to be granted.
Right,
Approval may be granted.
yes.
It also looks like that's referring back to E, which says, when visiting premises furnishing adequate toilet facilities. I don't know how that's gonna apply, but I don't see how that could exist on a completely vacant piece of property.
If you don't have, if you didn't have water or sewer hooked up to it,
Well, somebody can dry camp for 2 days.
I understand that, Mark.
No problem.
I'm learning, but,
Yeah.
but who's gonna do that? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know they will.
Hey, I dry camp many a time.
Well, I think the general consensus that the storm has got to be something that just happened 2.5 years ago, and we're not content to live under that umbrella anymore.
Right.
I think that's been sort of the general consensus at this table for some time. We wasn't sure, did we have it in writing? Kathy wasn't sure, none of us were sure. So, I agree with what Bobby said, that,
Well,
I mean, that's,
and
just to
talking
put it
about
on a lot.
what we got going on, I really think we have the ticket, but ordinance 559, which was our old ordinance,
Yeah,
and with our 150.04, we can just work in that just a little bit here and there and make it where Kathy can know what to do and our citizens will know what to do.
okay. What was that section again?
Ordinance 559,
Yeah.
that's our old ordinance.
Right.
There's a few things that have to be changed in there, not much. And 150.04, the code.
Oh, I got you, just.
On the 559.
Well, see, it's almost the same.
Well, it's not-
They should be close to the same.
They're-
Mayor, if I might, on D,
D, okay?
on 150.04,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it already states that you can have an RV for construction, but it caps it out at a year and a half.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So if Kathy issues a permit based on the fact that they pulled the building permit, that starts your calendar. And again, that says a year and a half for completion of the home. Those
Whichever
are,
comes first.
whichever comes first. So that should cover all of our construction. And that should also cover all of our, lack of a better term, lackadaisical builders that are pulling a permit so that they can stay on the property and then just pull a foundation permit, 60 days later, pull the other part of the foundation permit. And I don't know that people are doing that, but there are people that have been building on their homes for a long period of time. I mean, not everybody's construction has the same funding as everybody else's, so it might take them a year and a half to build.
Some people are doing it themselves.
Yeah. So, but again, a year and a half, a year and a half is typically enough time.
And you can backtrack and find that initial date of their building permit, assuming they have one. If they don't have one, they have to justify or be some other one.
So basically, D gives you the avenue for rebuilding.
Well, I believe according to the building department that we're still under the state of emergency and that the building permits do not have an expiration date.
This isn't about an expiration of the building permit, it's about,
But if they have an
1.5
active building
years
permit, they
from
don't
the
start
date.
building, they can wait 10 years before they
Now,
start.
this is whichever is sooner. The permit or a year and a half. That's what this reads, is a year
They
and a
can
half.
have a building permit, Kathy, and not need an RV. My point is, to me, the only correlation for me that we're putting those two together is how long we're gonna allow the RV. But many people have building permits that don't have RVs.
Sure.
So, if they're gonna use the RV part of the land code, then we can put a time limit on it, is my point. Okay. Well, are we satisfied that D does what we are comfortable with? Yeah, come on.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, Rock Trees, 422 Colorado. 5 years ago, I brought my property here. I came up to the city and asked them about bringing an RV here. I got shown code 709, your ordinance 709. 709 strictly said, once your house is under construction, you can have an RV here for 6 months, 6 months max. I stayed at Tyndall Air Force Base for 6 months, waiting to bring my RV up here. Your ordinance on 559 lists that year and a half. That was signed in 2008. This is now 2021. After the hurricane, I went to all your meetings, we sat here and discussed the RVs. That all came up to, and believe me, everybody wanted to do it. Actually, nobody sitting at the table besides the mayor was the only one on the city council at the time, right after the hurricane. So it all got discussed. And your house got wiped out, you can bring an RV in here, get your building permit, and live in it, because this is where your home was, you had nowhere to live. So you amended 709 and made it 709A. Why beat this thing to death? Why not just go back to 709? 709 was your last ordinance, it was written somewhere after 2012, I think. It's after 559, and just give it back to where it was. You can have an RV on your property for 6 months once your house is under construction.
so 709 was.
The original
adopted
709.
December 4th, 2018.
Okay.
It was adopted to last for, it set some start dates, but 365 days following. It was never intended to be the long-term.
No, that was 709A. The original 709 was 6 months. When you amended that for the food trucks and for your 365 days, you made it 709A. Your original 709 was 6 months. And you know, that's what you're dealing with now. I mean, you look here and you know it. 95% of what you're dealing with is not people who live here full-time. The people who live here full-time have rebuilt their homes, 98% of them, and they've cleaned their property up. Everything now that Kathy's dealing with the codes are people who don't live here.
Because see, it says that, Rob. I got you, brother. I'm on. It says under section 2, residential uses, the city normally allows a recreational vehicle or camper to be placed on an inhabited for 6 months on a parcel where the construction of a home is occurring. So then it says, during the building moratorium adopted on November 6th, this 6-month period shall not begin running.
And that moratorium expired, I think, February 5th.
Yes, sir, Bill.
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
I think it's 709. Was that the first time, and I think it's in there, where we said you couldn't put an RV on a lot unless it had a house previously there, or basically you couldn't put an RV on a lot without being associated with a house? I thought that had been.
I think it's in here that we didn't approve a RV going where there wasn't a house.
Yeah, and I'm saying though, the one you're looking at though doesn't state, as I believe Bobby indicated, that you didn't state that you had to have a house there to put an RV, you couldn't just put it on an open lot. And I guess my question again was that the first time we actually, even though it's no longer in play, was that the first time we actually said that an RV had to be located for storage purposes on the lot that contains their house? Instead of just.
I don't see that in here.
Okay, I thought it was there, I'm sorry.
It may be, I'm still looking, but.
Yeah. So I thought that had been in play before. I think it's in there, you could put it on a vacant lot. If there was some reason you couldn't put it on your own lot, and the person that owned the lot next door to it.
Well, it does say that, yes, it does, right here.
That was for rebuilding.
It does say that, Bill. It says, the following special rules apply for the use of residentially zoned lots and other lots where the location of a home is required prior to Hurricane Mike.
Yeah. I'm saying though, was that the first time we addressed
Oh.
it instead of just having it, I can bring it down for a week and stick it on my vacant lot?
No, because when we were talking several years back when Tom Bailey was mayor about uses of vacant lots, there was something about that. Yes, you remember.
I thought it would have been put in somewhere as they were updating the original one, one of the updates, but I'm not sure.
It's,
So when,
it's 709A expired.
Oh, I know.
No, I'm asking, now, isn't that the one you said is expired? I'm looking for a
yes,
date.
I think the question is about, before that was adopted in late 2018,
Yeah.
were there clear rules before about whether you could put an RV on a vacant piece of property? Well, it goes back to that original section 150.04, we were talking about the RV rules, and we'd have to go through these line by line to see if there's a way to do it, but the main one on here, in my mind, is that could apply. You've got your construction, during construction, that's a vacant lot, but you're starting construction. And the other would be the 14-day short-term duration, but again, it says when visiting premises, furnishing adequate toilet facilities. I think the intent of that was if you're visiting your friends and you're staying at your friend's house, and if you need to, you can go in to your friend's house, or you're going to an RV campground and there's a plug-in spot. I don't think it was intended to cover a fully vacant lot.
But that's what was covered when there was this big discussion about this, when Tom Bailey was mayor, because there was a huge discussion and argument about the uses of vacant lots.
And I think that was more about storage. And so, I mean, at times that could be RVs, but it had to do with trailers or boats or a whole variety of things. I don't think they were so much discussing the details of whether someone was staying in an RV. It was the idea of whether you could, if you had 2 lots and a lot next to your house, whether you could store boats or something on your second lot. I do remember that, but I don't think that they were really combined together in the same conversation.
All right. This is gonna be a hard thing to moderate. I'm sure I do. There, won't you moderate this workshop?
Gee, thanks, and I always wanted to moderate, but I didn't think you were gonna throw me to the wolves.
Well, I don't mean to. I don't know, yeah, go ahead, Gal, I see your hand up.
It's not an easy thing, this is not an easy thing to
So,
figure out.
so my question is on E. So it said, the one about the 14 days per calendar year, and I'm gonna piggyback off of what Mr. Bobby said a while ago. So say his family comes for a week in March, and he comes down here and pulls a permit. So is it gonna just be issued for that week? And then say in June during snapper season, they wanna use their remaining 7 days. So is he gonna then pull another permit? Because otherwise, that seems, I know she
It's a
doesn't.
bookkeeping nightmare, the 14-day thing creates.
Yes, because I was gonna say, who's gonna, bless your heart.
That's
okay,
right.
what
Who's
do you
gonna
think
keep
to
up
do?
with it?
Who's gonna be the innkeeper on that?
That's true, but
That's
who's
right,
gonna
Judy,
keep
no.
up, who's gonna keep up if we don't have it?
Right,
How you gonna keep up with this person that's got this trailer here, that, let somebody stay in it for 2 days, and then a couple weeks more, let somebody stay in 2 more days?
Well, I guess you,
There's no way she can keep
No,
up with
no.
that, or none, you gotta have some way to do it.
Well, if you wanted an alternative that's easier, instead of doing a total number of days in a calendar year, you could just pick a number of days in a row. And if you exceed that, it's too many. Cause it's just easier to keep track. And your neighbor knows, well, it's been there 5 days, it needs to go now. Trying to add up multiple stays throughout the year, it's almost impossible.
Well, I mean, they could be coming down and staying in the one he keeps there all the time, so it's not necessarily that it just shows up for 5 days. I mean, it's there all the time, but somebody's actually in it now for 5 days.
That's true.
Like mine or Jerry's or whoever's. And I think the real violations, does it seem like the real violation of this deal here is because people are coming just to visit and stay? That's not really it. It's construction related, cleaning lots off, and people a guy called me, wanted to know, he said it's too stringent if I'm coming down. I need to be there so I can look at my lot and help the engineer, and I'm thinking, nah, not really, you really don't.
You know, they got campgrounds,
Yeah, and
and, you know, if you don't come in for a week to look at it, go to campground.
yeah,
I
well,
mean, I've done this for 40 years, it's not, you know,
well,
Yeah,
there's lots of
some
people
you
that
just
go on
give back.
the vacation rental site by Mexico Beach owners, and they ask for a weekend or whatever to come down here and look at their property. So there are people doing that are either using hotels or whatever. So, I mean, there are some people who, they do try to find a way. So, I mean, there is a way rather than putting it on a vacant lot for a week at a time.
perhaps we should, would it make it easier now that we try to do this the other way, is to kind of come up with what we're trying to keep from happening and what's okay with us that does happen, and then go in here and see if we got it in here or not? What do you think? Does that sound like an idea? I mean, because what we're trying to
I'm
do,
open to anything
it'll make this go,
well, no, I mean,
it'll make it work.
here's what I agree with. I agree that Kathy has gotta have a valid set of rules.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
And if we can't just, I mean, it really seems like in this wording that we've got what we want, we just maybe, we're trying to, that 14-day thing is, we gotta get away from that, because we can't enforce it, and it's always gonna be all these exceptions, and so I'm just for simplifying what it is that people can do with their cameras. That's all. And having said that, how we do that is up to us, or either somebody, we need a team leader, we need somebody that says, Bobby said it earlier, I liked what he said. And Don't that seem pretty, I mean, is that just making it too simple, or am I?
That's why I ain't saying that, I mean,
I know,
we beat the dead horse to death, and it's.
I
it's
said,
right
you
in
gotta
front
have
of
a
them,
house,
but
you gotta have a
nobody-
house
Nobody wants to say it.
to have a camper,
You don't
right?
have a house, you don't have.
Yeah.
Alright, then if
You
you do
can't
have a
live.
camper at your house, what can you do with it? Can you live in it?
Oh, no,
Okay, can't live in it. You just store it there.
that's all.
Okay, well, does that make sense? I mean, let's get it down to,
It's basically what we had to start.
I don't, but we,
So what you can store it there, but you can't live in it?
Not at
Even
all.
if there wasn't a
No,
house?
Yes, coming for 3X, not at all. That's easy, that works, it's easy.
yeah, I mean, it's simple. And if there was never a house on a lot, you're not allowed to have a camper.
Unless you have a house under construction.
Oh, yeah,
Which is
but
here.
I'm talking about, we're trying to solve some of the issues that I've heard Kathy, you know, there's, so, for an example, the guy that bought our lot over here on, he should never been allowed to put a camper, there was never a house, there was a vacant lot. I'm just using that as an example.
That should never happen.
Right, but my point is, there's others, we've heard Rock talk about how many, there's people around that have vacant lots. And if they don't have a building permit, they can't bring their camper down here and say, well, I'm working on it, or like I think Darryl said, we're gonna meet with the engineer, we're gonna do, has to have a valid permit. Is that,
I
Nick,
agree.
you- I'm just sort of throwing things out, just,
What we actually started thinking about this for, your house got torn up, down. You don't have a place to stay, you have a camp on there to get your house built. That was our idea before.
all right, now she mentioned, another example, she mentioned at the last meeting, there was a homesteaded lot, which meant there was a house there. And they feel like they're entitled to live on that with a camper, even though they don't have a building permit. Isn't it right, Kathy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What happens there?
That went away with 709 because that had a duration.
It shouldn't be there.
It shouldn't
I
be there
agree.
anymore.
I
It
agree,
should not
shouldn't
be
be
there
there.
anymore.
The fact that they had a home 2.5 years later, they still don't have a home or working to get a home, I don't think they're entitled to put a camper. Okay?
Might as well let them have a mobile home.
Anybody could make that argument that hasn't built their house yet, that's not a,
Exactly,
Situation.
exactly. Everybody that lost could say,
or anybody that
I just have a-
could make the same argument. If they homestead the property, they make the same argument.
Okay, so what
man,
we
you
could,
tried to write all this down?
But you've
So-
got to have a house to have a camper.
okay, what?
That's my thing. I'm
So-
down with that. House count. No
Number one.
house, no count.
Number one, no house,
Building permit, you have to have.
unless you have a building permit.
Yes.
Of course.
At your
we
building
do.
permit.
When do you, can you put it on as soon as you get a building permit, or do you have to wait until the project starts?
Gotta be started.
It's
Like I
gotta be
said,
started.
Yeah, let's,
I said, I have pilings in the ground, I couldn't have.
Construction has to be started.
Construction had to be started, and it was 6 months old. If you're not, I don't know any place in Florida, I've lived everywhere in Florida. You can't go anywhere, Tampa Bay, anywhere, and just say, I bought property, let me bring a mobile home, an RV in
I
for you
agree.
and build my house.
Well, we've all said, Rock, we were trying to be, we had some compassion to
No, I
what
understand
happened.
that.
And it got out of hand. The wildfire started, we didn't know how to stop.
People took advantage of it.
That's right. Well, we got a workshop today, we're gonna figure it out.
And the
Okay,
way we're gonna,
okay.
another way, can I say why?
Yes,
please?
I'm sorry.
Then I'm gonna.
No.
I done made my point, no house, no camper. And I think the best, my way, Kathy could probably, she should be talking anyway. In my opinion, the best way to do it is just, if they got a camper there and not having a building permit, and they just homesteaded or whatever reason, then the way I think is to pursue it is to cities to cut the water. It might be hard, it might be harsh, but we got.
Well, I mean, it's an enforcement that we can enforce, we
We
can't
gotta
make them
stop.
give us money if they don't want, if they're not gonna pay
And,
the
and,
funds.
you know, you can look at it two
Sue 'em.
different ways, we losing $13 now, and that's what they're gonna throw in my face, yeah, I'll pay you $113, come down here once every 6 months.
Now, would that be legal to do?
We can do it different cases are gonna be different depending on what's going on. If somebody's living there, it's a constitutional principle, you have to give them
Oh, yeah.
a notice and a chance to appeal the reasoning. But in a lot of cases, what we have are, properties where there's already been a code enforcement violation issued. The person didn't challenge or appeal it, which means they've admitted the violation. So in those cases, especially if nobody's living there, if it's just an RV that's there that somebody comes and uses occasionally, we can get to the finish line faster on those. I'd say we give them one more notice, tell them we're gonna turn the water off.
Okay.
There you go.
That's it.
I'm good with
That
that.
sounds good.
Okay, let's.
Sounds good to me.
All right, much Rich, I can see that.
Let me tell you something now.
Wait now, wait now. Cut the water off. They got a neighbor, they run a water hose over to the neighbor's place.
And Bob, we
Well-
ain't running it.
I know, but you gonna run
It's
into
like
it.
having security cameras in the building. If a thief's gonna get you, he's gonna get you. It don't matter what you got. So,
And
Okay.
I see that, I see that.
So, and that's for a year and a half.
That's a different topic.
That's a different topic.
But it says in the other one, so we gotta clarify, that's what I'm saying, so.
We starting over.
Okay.
Brand new.
In 150, it says you can do it for a year and a half.
That's
But that's
strictly
only
based on
under
construction.
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 Under construction.
But that's
Only
what
tied
we-
to construction.
Okay, but all right, so no house, no camper, unless you have a building permit and construction has started. So they got, their construction has started, so they get a year and a half.
Now,
Or
Which-
construction is complete.
Right,
how
that's
long does
right.
the building permit last before they have to start construction?
They can file for an extension after 6 months.
But
It's
it
a
says you
6-month
have to
permit.
start construction.
Before you could.
So you can
It's a
issue,
6-month
if
permit.
you go get a permit today,
Jenny clarified that last week.
and the guy don't start on your house for 6 months,
Yeah.
then
You start.
you start when the construction
Sure.
starts, not when you get the permit.
Right.
Help me there, I said that right, didn't I?
That's what I'm in favor for. I think that's what needs, I mean, you know, just go.
All right, Kathy, Bill, I'm sorry.
Just a curious question. We've talked about cutting the water off in situations like this. Do we have, if they have electric running, do we have a way of,
Nope.
thank you.
I have
That was answered quickly. Appreciate it.
I got, Kathy, I'd like to have your, wait a minute, Bob, let me get, now Bob put on this time, I'm gonna hush. What
That's
you
what you
think?
said.
I know, what you think, Kathy?
So far, I'm liking what you're saying, that it must be, you must have already started construction before an RV can come. You can't just buy a lot, bring an RV in and say, oh, I'll get my building permit in a month or two from now.
And the rest of this stuff on 150 on the code, you agree with, I mean, does some of that wording in there might need to be changed, or is that, can you uphold this with the
Well,
code?
wording
Or,
is a little-
I know, there's a couple things, and I think we need a few words or changed or something, but you gonna be the one that, you know, in meetings, when I'll ask you, Captain, the
They're
code
gonna ask me
for.
for the ordinance to prove that, you know, what I'm telling them is true. I've already had them ask me for it.
A lot of what you want is implied, but we can make it crystal clear.
That's what we need to do, and I like what you said about getting rid of the 14-day thing and doing I mean, the 14-day thing is, she can't do that.
No, nobody can do that.
I like the time frame. I forget how you said it, but I mean, that made sense to me. Get rid of the 14 days and they get a permit for a specified period of time, is that right? That way the neighbor, you said the neighbor then,
And you keep track of it.
yeah, everybody knows.
And you could do this short-term occupation more than once, because it's not a cumulative thing through the year, but it would be easier to keep track of.
What do y'all think about the 14-day thing? Do you wanna give a time frame? I mean, do you wanna allow, sort of, if you would, make it legal, or do we just say,
So
just don't have it?
how do we time it again? How do we work it on a time versus giving 14 days?
Well, we could create anything you want, but just as an example, and I don't know if this is something you have to get an approval from the city for or not, that's been discussed, but that's not currently something you have. Let's say it's a 5-day duration, that someone could occupy an RV for 5 days, and beyond 5 days, it's a violation. Well, the advantage to that over the current rule is anyone paying attention will know, there have been people there for 10 days already. They've definitely violated 5 days. It's easier to keep track. But it also means that somebody could do 5 days, and then a few weeks later do 5 days again, a few weeks later do 5 days again. So you gotta think about the details of how you want it set up. If they're coming to the city to get approvals though, you could say, no more than 5 days, and you can only get one of these things every.
Who are we
60 days.
helping by giving 5 days and 14 days? I'm not, well, I'm asking, I'm just out thinking, who are we trying to appease with that?
And if they got water and sewer, oh, you talking about coming to somebody's house, so it's dead, okay.
Yeah, and the other option is just, you cannot stay in a camper at somebody's house. That's simple. I thought that at least some of the council wanted to have that flexibility for guests.
Well, I went duck hunting and I came home and appreciate got rid of my bed, and I had to stay in my camper 7 days.
She got rid of your bed.
She got rid of my bed.
What'd you do?
I slept in the
Damn
camper.
camper.
Never mind.
Should have let you back in the door.
All I'm trying to say is,
I wouldn't have told that.
Yeah, you would. That's his point, he was trying to get
she
it.
didn't throw my clothes out, she let me come in the house when I got home.
Wow.
Sheriff, I wouldn't have told that.
Well, bless her heart, she said I needed it in
All
bed,
right,
that was
well, let's,
good.
go ahead, Bill.
If we don't have a time frame, what about the person that wants to let their child stay there indefinitely because they need a job or whatever, and, 6 months? Do we have it in there that cannot occur unless we have a time frame?
Yeah, that's a negative ghost rider for me, huh?
I mean, I know there's issues with keeping track of time frames, but even if you say 2 weeks and you happen to notice someone's been living there for 2 months, you can at least say, hey, I noticed it's been over a 2-week period of time, you can't allow this to happen according to ordinance, and it's in there. So my question again is, do we have in the ordinances now that if I have a camper, I can't let my child live there for 6 months or whatever in my
It
camper?
just says, can we occupy?
Can we word it as a short-term visit,
So
something like, simple as that? Nick?
For
Whatever's
who?
easy.
What are we,
For like, my guest wants to come
we,
and stay in the camper,
Short
you know.
terms of-
see, then we get into opening that back up to campers being used.
Short-term rentals.
Yes, I mean, that's what happens.
So the question was what's in the current rules, and that's where we end up in this 14 days cumulative during the year, which is, I mean, yeah, it makes sense, but it's too hard to keep track of. The kind of proposed rule, it's totally up to
Hey,
you.
we're right at the finish line here. We ought to be able to get over that line.
And the simplest thing would just say.
What do you think? I'm just,
I'm just-
do away with the 14 days.
I think, in my opinion, my own opinion, if you, we can't enforce it, why would we?
Well, exactly.
Poor Kathy got.
Bob, what do you think about 14? I mean, or is that a big
Well,
deal?
it's next to impossible to enforce, I guess. And we do have it here in this 150.04 self-contained toilet and sewage connection. Can't be, shall not be connected.
That's right. Well, that was the whole purpose of that, was that at that time, nobody wanted to have campers as separate bedrooms to their house, so to speak.
So,
It's simple, just we want 14 days, we want, no. That's where I hold with this.
I'm down with
It can't
14
be
days.
enforced, there's no way you can enforce the 14 days.
So if you delete that rule, what you're doing is you're making it so you cannot occupy that RV at all. You can't let your kids stay there for the weekend. You can't do anything, which is easy to enforce. It's a
Well,
straightforward.
that's the way it's been, that's the way it was for many years here.
Uh-oh. Yes, Ms. Lyons?
What if you, have a relative, you don't have a camper, but your relative has a camper and wants to come down and visit for 7 days?
Well, they go to RV parks, they don't come to your house.
Okay.
I mean, that's me speaking now, but,
They could do that under the current rule, or might change that.
yeah, that's right, if you leave, but again, things. All right, I know where I am, everybody else, speak up.
I'm not against the 14 days, but what I'm at, the problem is having Kathy be able to enforce it. That's the problem.
I have an idea for what it's worth.
Good.
You get a punch card. If you wanna occupy your RV for the year, at any point in time, you come over here, you pay $50 for a punch card. It has 5 days, it has 14 days, it has whatever number of days. And you get, if you do it in January, you punch 5 days for January, if you punch 5 days for December, once you've used those 14 days, you're done with it, or 5 days, or whatever number of days. Again,
Somebody gotta keep up with that.
but again, at least it's a punch card, it's something that's on the trailer, it's
But
visible.
why do we want that?
If you don't want days in the trailers, then the easiest way is to do
I'm
away with the
just
days.
asking, if somebody can tell me why we wanna do that, I'll listen, I can't find the reason. Anybody out there, anybody out there got a suggestion?
I've had a loaded house, and I have let, and I've never overdid it, I don't think at all. I've let my grandkids stay in there for a weekend. So I can see the benefits of it, but at the same time, if it's going to, if we can't get some type of easy way to regulate it, then
Well, there is no, if you got a way, that's why I said,
All right, Darryl, I know you think it's
All right.
hard, boy.
How many, but seriously, how many of the people like you and like me and like him that actually have a camper at this table, we're not violating that. And I would imagine that most citizens are not violating that.
There's campers on lots that have been here for the last 5 years, and there's spillover whenever all their family comes and stays.
Well,
It's been going on for years and years and years.
I understand there's a fellow on my street that does the same thing, and he's been doing it forever, and when they gather, they all gather, and there'll be, for 3 or 4 nights, there'll be people in that camper. And they're good folks, they're good, they're not troubled, and it's not a big deal, and I just think we're kind of over-regulating something that's not a major deal unless we have a complaint about it, unless,
there you go. When you have a complaint, then you deal with it.
then you come up and you go, well, look, Kathy can go, and I'm saying this, and you tell me what you think, whether that's doable or not. Kathy can go and say, we've had a complaint, the complaint says that there's been people there for 2 weeks. So, give us a statement, tell us what you're doing, how much longer are they gonna be there? Is that something that would work for you, Kathy? Do you
I
think
don't
that?
know, we should say how much longer they're gonna be there, we could just say they need to be gone by X amount of days,
All right,
2 days or 3 days.
so on the code, it says 14 days, and you've had your 14 days, so you need to have your folks leave alone.
Why not just change it to 0 days?
Yeah.
Until somebody
Yeah,
gets a
it just
complaint,
seems
then
like
you
it
go
needs to
there and
be an
say,
all or a
There
none
you go.
thing, because if you try to put a day number on it, it's gonna be,
Well,
she's gotta be an innkeeper.
I'm not for saying you can't stay in your camper, I don't think that that's right.
well, unless somebody complains about it because they're making noise or anything else, then you have a thing for Kathy to go over and say, hey, this is in ordinance, you're not supposed to be here, find another place to go.
So,
Until somebody
Mine's
complains, just make it
loophole.
0 days.
So 0 days, but we're not gonna, no one's gonna get thrown in jail if we find out
Exactly,
somebody's
until
staying in
somebody
your house.
complains about something.
Unless there becomes a problem, and then we can say you shouldn't have done it, the code says you can't stay there at all.
Yeah, move to an RV park. That's it. Just
Well,
make
if
it
you have a
0
fine
days.
for it, then with 0 days, and they're not supposed to be there, we have a fine for it, it goes every day after you notify them, that should be an indication that you do.
It still goes back to the water and sewage hookup. We gotta be able to, that's the way you're gonna be able to tell, if somebody's gotta have it unhooked, if they're gonna have to store it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Now, again, I can see nothing wrong with electrical during, for climate control or whatever, but, you're not gonna stay in too long if you don't have water and sewage. You can dry camp for a weekend. And that's already in this here.
That's in there too, that's right, it is. Nick, if somebody said, could you write that up, what would you say?
What would you write?
What would you write? If we
We
did,
would delete E, the 14-day section, and then the section about, staying in it during construction, we would make it completely clear that you have to have started construction, not just gotten a permit. But you want the 18 days to run from the date that they received their permit, right? So if they don't start
18
building soon,
months.
18 months. In other words, if they don't start building quickly, they might actually get less than 18 months in an RV, but that's because they
is
didn't
that
start
the,
building quickly.
isn't that what,
Date of the
is that what we're saying?
Let's see.
I think that's exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah,
very
yeah, if they,
doable.
if they get a permit and lag around for a year before they start, well then, that's,
I thought they couldn't bring an RV.
They can't bring-
unless there was
They
construction.
can't bring it until they
they
start.
can't bring it till they start. But
Right.
my point is, if they say, well, but after, let's say they start the builder, you know, something happened, they can't get to it in time, or they don't get extensions, that's when the clock starts.
If they get a building permit and they still haven't started building a year later, which I don't know if that's realistic, but if they haven't, they'd only be
Some
left,
of these folks may think that, yeah,
they'd only be left with 6 months to actually use the RV because they took so long to get started.
yeah, that's, yeah.
Well, you can't have, water or electrical hookup until it starts, can you?
You can get temporary power, yeah, and a construction
Not
meeting.
just on it, yeah, on a construction site, but not just have a permit and they don't do work for 6 months. You can't just have power already on there. It has to have construction started on it.
You have to get, an electrician has to go
Yeah,
and
you
do a
get
permit
temporary.
to put a temporary pole in at your construction
I know
site.
I had to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
they could sit
so-
there, yeah, they could sit there 6, 8 months.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that they have to start, but you could actually literally have that on there. But if the construction has not started, that's the way we worded it. If construction hadn't started, you can't put a camper, so it doesn't matter if they got electric already there or water,
That's right, can't,
a meter there, it doesn't matter. Because that's kind of the foolproof part of that, no house, no camper, unless you have a building permit and the construction has started.
We need to say, and the construction has started.
I did, and construction
Nick,
started.
is that,
Not
are we
or.
good?
Yeah,
We
right,
good with
right,
that?
yeah, exactly.
Are we all comfortable, are we going no date, we're gonna do away with that, 14-day thing?
I
And
agree
and
with
then if we have
Well,
complaints,
wait, we're,
can't we,
we need
if
to move
complaints
on.
come to Kathy, she goes out and
You're on
says,
14 days.
you're not even supposed to be in that, so
Exactly.
move on.
That makes sense.
Would that make it easier for
Thank
you,
It does.
Kathy?
Kathy, I was trying, is that an affirmative back there? Okay,
Yep.
I couldn't see your head there, all right.
Now, our enforcement for that is cutting the water off, but if they're living there and somebody's, of course, this is not for somebody storing, just having a camper at their house.
So the cutting the water off scenario works best if it's just a vacant lot with a camper on
That's
it.
right.
If somebody's
Living there, it's
we
all
gotta
there.
look closely at that.
Yeah, yeah,
do a
that's-
few
You
notices.
can't do that.
Our
And that's-
normal
Well, if they're
enforcement's
living there, they
fine.
don't need a construction permit, first of all, they got, unless they're remodeling.
Our normal enforcement would just be to find somebody, require that the camper be moved.
Okay.
What about out there, the 1, 2, 5 of you, any other comments?
Is a year and a half too long?
No, if you talk to these contractors now and builders, I think I talked to, Lance with Southeast, and he told me, really and truly, he told me, the time you get started, now not building, but the time you get started, it takes about 2 years now. To get a builder, because they so far behind, we don't have a place for the builders there, and they haven't.
I don't think that's too long at all.
I think, you know, I understand what you're saying, but just talk about.
Remember now, it says, or completed. So
Yeah.
it's,
So if the house is complete.
how official, once they get the CO,
Yeah,
They gotta come out of that camper.
right, Nick, I mean, we got that clarified, but, okay.
Right, they could still store it, nobody uses it.
No, but yeah, oh, yeah.
Nothing's hooked up, but right.
That's right. Yes, sir, Bill?
If we're coming to the end, I do have one request that goes through not here right now, but if we're really getting ready to start enforcing some of our code, making sure we, let's say cleaning up and everything, I would ask that we look at, in about 4 months from now, at our budget. There are times I've asked about things, and I know many of our citizens know, that we have to have money in the budget to, if it gets the far end, for us to take care of. And if we don't have money in there, then, of course, the typical answer that comes back is we don't have money in the budget, so we can't do it. But that also tells our citizens, if we get there, long-term, or people who just moved here, that we're not interested enough in, taking it that far. We want you to move, we do something, we send you a letter. But if we have to go further than that, and it's gonna cost the city a little bit to do it, we're not interested. And we haven't put any in the past, and I'm not knocking anyone or anything. I think it's time we put some in there, that if we need the money to continue with whatever the process is that we're working on, that we have it there. That's the only request.
Good thing. All right, Nick, you got questions, or Mario, do you, in terms of writing or condensing or putting, do we need?
Everything you said makes sense, and I think it'll help enforcement too.
Stay there? Good
Yes.
job. You
Yeah.
moderated right through that.
That's what,
Gabby, Gabby's got her hand up.
Oh, come on, Gal.
what else you got,
I got
Kathy?
a question for you. Some of these people I've been fining, and they may have paid like one time, but it's still, it's accumulating. Is there any way we can force them to pay that, like not issue a building permit until they satisfy their fines that were already issued to them regarding the RVs?
We do have a rule in the books to that effect. I think it's in this packet.
Can we send them along to the table?
But most of them have a camper on the empty lot, Kathy, without building, see, we gonna stop that.
See, I want to tell you, I know Nick probably, I don't know if I should even say this, but I really think it's a fact that we're in control more than we realize with the water and sewer department. We don't have to issue water and sewer. If somebody comes there in there wanting water and sewer from us, there should be a
That's right.
mechanism in, somewhere in that city hall that says, well, let's see, let me check who you are, what's happened here.
I agree.
And I think we underestimate that sometimes.
Yes, we did. That's why we got the trouble we got. Because we hooked up the water and sewage to these people that wasn't planning on it.
So I don't know, Nick, if, or Mario, how you, I'm just saying, to me, that would be the time to say, well, look here, we see you've been in a camper, or you didn't pay your last bill, I don't know what our database allows.
So you should not have water service if you do not have a building permit or a house.
That's it.
Or if
Should
you
be that
have,
simple.
if you,
Yeah.
what if you, like Kathy's talking about, you got these fines against you? You didn't pay, what if they're an old customer and didn't pay? I don't know what access we have to all that, I don't know.
I located the rule, it's in the land development code excerpt you have. It's at the end of 7.10.07, which is page 18 in your packet. It says notwithstanding, this is all the code enforcement fine section about special masters. Notwithstanding any provision of the code, no municipal officer, agent, employee, or board shall approve, grant, or issue any operating permit, license, building permit, certificate of use and occupancy, occupational license, plating action, or zoning action to any named violator, the owner of at least 90% of the named violator, or any entity wholly owned by a named violator, with unpaid civil penalties, unpaid administrative costs of hearing, unpaid investigative enforcement tests or monitoring costs, unpaid liens, any or all of which are owed to the city pursuant to provisions of the code of the city of Mexico Beach. So Kathy was suggesting, it's in here pretty well.
Can we put that on, like, what we're
Good job.
writing up now, so it's all together? I mean, not that whole sentence, that was a little lengthy, but.
can it be put on the, how we do fines? In other words, we can fine them, give me a letter saying I've got a fine, and just point blank say you can't get water or sewer until these fines are paid if you're under construction, or whatever.
Yeah, it's currently in the section that's about administrative fines and cost repairs and things, but it would be,
Well, if somebody in that office has gotta have access to that. That's my point. It's in,
We
but I don't
do,
think Sherry or Mario or Al or somebody who walks in there is gonna say, well, okay, I mean, we wouldn't know where to look. How do you,
We have a spreadsheet that we run for any citations. I used to do it when I worked at the.
we do?
Yeah, any citations that we've said no, we have a spreadsheet. that
All right,
we
how do they get to you? How do you?
Well, code enforcement used to give us the
Okay.
citations,
All right.
and we would put them on the spreadsheet. And I think Sherry still does that, you still give Sherry the
I
citation.
had to get rid of the ones for the RVs because one copy goes to them, the other copy goes to my sheet in their file.
Maybe just make a copy, what you have, and then we'll put it on the spreadsheet, and that way we can back that.
we could also add
We
sentence to
need
the
to know.
citation that.
And we could-
explains
There you
things,
go.
everybody's aware of it and is paying attention to it, and it becomes common knowledge.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting used to doing it.
And we could add that to our no house, no camper rule. I mean, here, and this is how we make.
It's like a
it.
slogan.
We can, I would rather cross reference to it.
I
yeah.
know it.
We can type up for Kathy, A, B, C, and a list, and then reference this in the code.
Okay, I have one more thing,
Yes, sir.
please. I know a fellow that's been in his camper, we got a lot of junk in the yard, and been there since the storm, and so now we're gonna go and tell him, we're about to cut your water off, right?
Not
Go
necessarily.
through Nick
The,
and him.
the easy cases are the ones where nobody's living there permanently.
Okay,
If somebody's living there, we've got to do a real notice, a real opportunity for a hearing where he'll try to explain why he's supposed to be living there. I think we should probably track the notice time period for non-payment of bills, which it's a little complicated, but it's roughly a month. It's not a quick thing, because you don't wanna surprise somebody and cut their water off in a few days.
so within a month's time, we ought to have them to where we can say, you gotta go, we're fixing to cut it off. Roughly, right now, roughly speaking.
Roughly.
I think that's plenty, personally.
I think if there's one I'm thinking of, he's got a sign up there that says.
Yes, it is.
And, so it goes along with, he might have had a building permit, but that's been a year and a half ago.
I doubt he's got a permit, I think he's got a sign.
You just got a sign.
Did that person receive a citation, just a regular code enforcement citation already?
He did. I've been over there talking.
It's gonna be, that's gonna be one of them Nick things and the special master things that, I mean.
Yeah, no, we're gonna, yeah,
It's homestead, like Kathy said, that's
Yeah.
gonna be, you're gonna have to go through Nick with him. The ones that people not staying in, that's gonna be the easy ones, I think.
yeah,
And
right,
it's gonna really clean up the city.
yeah, right.
That one's gonna be a Nick,
But nonetheless, we still gotta make it happen.
oh yes, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, cause it's been 2.5 years, so.
Time to go.
Okay. What do you think? Can we
We
leave?
laugh at that, Julie.
I'm afraid to say, can we leave? Is everybody through? Dick, again,
You sure
I
you
think
got
we're good.
enough now?
I like,
I got enough for
I think
today.
I think it all sounds simple
I
to me.
got
I
my
like
white
it.
digest.
Do you, I can prepare a draft. Do you wanna have a first reading right away, or do you wanna look at this next council meeting before we do that?
No, we kick this horse, man. If
Yeah, let's-
it's something we can, if it's what we see on paper is what we agree to, then I hope we'd have it for the next meeting.
We can always hold it over if
Sure,
it throws
sure.
a knot in something. Yeah, let's get it going. I'm forgetting.
I agree with that.
Okay, and since we're changing the city code, not the land development code, there's no mandatory step where it goes to the planning board, so this can move fairly quick.
Good. No house, no camper.
So we'll
Thank
say,
you, Jerry.
so Nick, is it
All right,
actually,
go ahead.
is it actually going to say that a RV permit will not be issued until the house is under construction?
Correct.
Because, I mean, that way, you know it's under construction. Whoever's
Tentatively,
gonna issue that permit will go to the property and make sure the house is under construction, now the permit's issued.
tentatively, Rock, this is what it's gonna sort of sound like when it gets through. It's probably gonna sound a little bit different, but it's gonna have the same meat, hopefully. No house, no camper, unless you have a building permit and construction is started. Asterisk, you have 1.5 years to complete the home or stay in the camper. If the home is completed, then you have to vacate the camper. You got a year and a half, whichever comes first, to finish the house or to get out of the camper regardless.
Right. Wax on, wax off.
And then if you don't, we're gonna cut the water off.
But you do want an actual permit from city staff?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
We already have permits.
What did you say?
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
What'd you say now?
So I already have permits that I can put on the camper.
That's a process.
I got it.
So we'll
Permit,
just get that
a
permit.
Yes.
physical, thank everybody for coming, I appreciate it.
You did, Bear. I'm glad that you done it, but.
Well, I think Kathy is probably should be the one that.
Y'all through with the camera?
Tickle about it.
Anybody wanna say